Industrial leaders and special guests, welcome back to this year's The IX event. Once again, here's LNS Research co-founder and commercial leader, Mehul Shah.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, look at the energy. If one day at LNS gives you so much energy, I don't know what to tell. Thank you for coming in again, for everybody who's here and everybody who's watching us virtually. Day 2 of the Industrial Transformation Executive event. Our event is a premier event for industry thought leaders and executives across different functions, whether it's operations, engineering, IT, quality, EHS, sustainability. All of you executives are changing the way you're operating your business, and we humbly request you and invite you all here for the Industrial Transformation event. So yesterday was all about how to make industrial transformation real. We had some amazing discussions. We had some great roundtables. Today we want to build on the momentum. We have a power-packed agenda, some great speakers similar to yesterday to hopefully help move your transformation a little bit faster. Now, all of you have probably seen this slide before. It really talks about the journey. A journey from level 1, which is a stage where there is no transformation. And I think a lot of folks here are at a place where they're getting some short-term wins, but there is not a broader transformation initiative. To a part where you're really looking at institutionalizing and scaling transformation. One of the challenges that we have as an industry is how do you make the prioritization between running the business and transforming the business? Because if you have to make a choice between running and transforming, you're always going to be focused on running the business. It is really important that we understand the journey that you're going to go through. Jeffrey Moore is a very smart guy, and the transformism chasm, the chasm that he talked about, has a lot of applicability to the business that we are in. It is really important when you are trying to steer a big ship, you know what the direction is. The whole focus today is to help you map the direction towards your transformation program. We have an amazing set of speakers today. We'll start with some inspiring keynotes. We'll go into 4 specific roundtables. We'll come back again here at 1 o'clock. We'll have an executive keynote session, and our event we'll wrap up our event at 2 p.m. So again, some really good speakers. We start with our analytics roundtable. You'll hear from the executives at International Paper, Pratt & Whitney, and Thermo Fisher on how they're leveraging data to drive insights in a new and creative way. You'll also hear about the topic of sustainability. We all are getting pressured about how do you operationalize sustainability. So you'll hear from Westinghouse and Ash Grove Cement on what they're doing to drive a sustainable operations and sustainable future. You'll also hear about how we are getting our organizations ready for industrial transformation. You'll hear from the leaders at Tiffany, as well as one of the world's largest food ingredient company, ADM, on how they are getting their organizations ready for transformation. And then finally, the most important topic, I think I've spoken to majority of you on this topic, is how do we get our organization ready with the changing workforce? So you'll hear from Georgia Pacific and Owen Scornin on what they are doing to drive the future of industrial work. For everybody who's attending virtually, we'll continue to talk about data and analytics. We have the CIO of Inteva, Tier 1, an automotive manufacturer, as well as the director of supply chain for Western Digital, talking about how they're using data to drive analytics and critical insights for their organization. We'll end our day today with a keynote panel with Mike Carroll from Georgia Pacific, the CEO of Seek, Vertex Pharmaceutical, the CEO of Sesma, John Dyke, really talking about how do we move analytics to action. Once again, I want to thank all of the sponsors. Thank you for supporting the research. Thank you for supporting the event. Thank you for bringing all these beautiful people together. We really appreciate your help. And now, I want to call our first keynote speaker to the stage. Really, really excited. He comes from a multi-billion-dollar organization, a brand whose shoes are probably in majority of our houses. Dave Wheeler is the COO of New Balance Athletics, one of the major manufacturer of shoes and sports apparel. He's basically looks at the overall end-to-end supply chain and operations at New Balance. His team is responsible for integrating automation and robotics to ensure that associates all around the world are safe and productive. He's a Master Six Sigma Black Belt and is passionate about sustaining and growing the New Balance culture of purpose. Please join me in welcoming Dave Wheeler, COO, New Balance Athletics.
All right, good morning, everybody. All right, when Matt asked me to kind of share the New Balance story, I definitely raised my hand because I think these forums are awesome. I love these forums because you get to hear so many different perspectives, and you can pick out what might work for you, what might not work for you. Maybe you're a supplier that says, hey, I could probably help you and get better. So I'm a big believer in these, and hopefully you take at least one nugget away from what I'm going to share over the next 20 minutes. And when Matt told me 20 minutes, I thought, I'm not even sure I can fit much into that, but I'm going to give it a shot. So you might have seen our building. It's about 5 miles down the road. It's on the south side of the Mass Turnpike. It's in a complex next to the Warrior Center, which is the Bruins training camp, next to the Auerbach Center, which is the Celtics training camp. We also have a new track, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's a fairly good-sized building. You can't miss it. People ask, what is that? Why does it look like that? It's really meant to be something in motion. And so that's what New Balance is about, keeping people moving in a positive way. Actually, New Balance founded in 1906, so a long history. It's really come into the forefront over the last 30 years or so. So 1906, William J. Riley, an immigrant, focused on folks that really had debilitating walking problems, foot problems. And he recognized, believe it or not, that the chicken's foot is the perfect balance. And you can see in the upper right-hand side of this slide the patent that he came up with, which is actually modeled after a chicken's foot. And he noticed that his customers, when they would come in, they'd be out of balance. When they take this insert, it would be New Balance. And so that's where the name began in 1906. Company grew nicely through the 40s, 50s, 60s, introduced one running shoe that became popular. It was called the Trackster. And if you look it up, you'd wonder, how did people run in that? It was state-of-the-art at the time. And 1972, Jim Davis came along, bought the company. He had 12 employees, $100,000 to buy the company, put $10,000 down, and worked the rest out through inventory sales. So kind of a small company at that point. I actually have one of the original employees that works for me now, been with the company now for over 50 years. So a lot of longevity at the company, a lot of loyalty, a lot of excitement to work at New Balance. And so the company grew significantly in the 70s. Jim is an entrepreneur. He developed some really fantastic running shoes that became #1 in runner's world. And so they went from making about 30 shoes a day to like flat out in one building just down the road, trying to increase that volume. And then he expanded throughout New England. And so that's where New England manufacturing really took off. That's when it took off. And so it's really an interesting, I think, Boston-based, made in America story that then accelerated globally because Jim was out there selling internationally. So that's where we stand now. It's an independently owned company. Jim and Ann Davis own 100% of it. Jim doesn't have a board of directors. That meeting takes place with Jim, and he is all about innovation, and that's what the company is really founded on, and he drives innovation every day. We just had a meeting up in Lawrence, which is where our Manufacturing Innovation Center is right now. Yesterday, we went through, top to bottom with Jim there, and he is so excited about pushing the envelope and how do we reinvent ourselves every single day. So I think the purpose statement for New Balance is super important. It keeps us motivated, engaged. It's about a greater purpose than just making shoes and making apparel. And so the purpose statement is independent since 1906. We empower people through sport and craftsmanship to create positive change in communities around the world. So there's a lot baked into that. A lot of sport, no question about it. Running, soccer, baseball, tennis. We're across the board. Craftsmanship, so we don't want to lose that original craftsmanship that people really value. That's super important to our consumers. And then creating positive change in communities around the world. Keeping people healthy is super important to us. And how we make the product is equally as important. Just a quick glance at by the numbers. We're about a $5 billion company right now. We have 41 offices around the world, as I mentioned, headquarters right down the road. We own and operate 6 New Balance manufacturing plants, which we're super proud of, as I mentioned. It's really kind of the heart of the company. And making those better and better, more efficient, more effective, making great product is one of my main goals. We have about 8,000 associates worldwide in a lot of retail stores, whether those are owned by New Balance or licensed out. So quite a global company, pretty exciting environment. Company has grown nicely, by the way, over the past 2 to 3 years. Last year, super strong. This year, double-digit growth through the third quarter. We expect that in the fourth quarter. The things that Matt talked about yesterday morning, meaning a lot of headwinds, we have lived through that. And we're living through, whether it's inflation, shortage of labor, even continued logistics delays, managing through all that. And so what I was going to focus on today is, let's open up the hood of New Balance. What does the engine look like? How do we make it run? There's no secret sauce. It's just a combination of a number of different things that we've put together that we feel like make us unique, but more importantly, make us successful. But by no means are we perfect. I'll just start with that. So you can see a lot of momentum with the company. In fact, one of the fastest growth rates among all apparel and footwear companies right now. Fast Company put us on the most innovative list last year. I won't go all through all of these images, but certainly whether it's lifestyle and some of our influencers that are out there, love the brand. We can't make enough of certain products. They sell out almost instantly. And then obviously a lot of different accolades. Up in the upper right, Trayvon, one of the athletes that ran in the Olympics, which we did really well in, loves our sports research lab. So I'll talk about that in a second and how that's enabling our brand athletes to become even better and perform better and achieve higher and more exciting results. We do operate under the umbrella of responsible leadership, and I think this is important. If I were to start on the upper right-hand side, so protecting the environment. And that's everything from the energy and climate, water stewardship, and waste reduction. Really focused on that. If I go counterclockwise, creating sustainable product. We all know what that looks like. Respecting human rights. Critically important, as I mentioned earlier, how we make our product is equally as important to revenue, profit, etc. And then building healthy communities. The healthy communities are critically important, whether that's keeping people in motion or giving back to communities through volunteerism. Just one example of that, I'm sure many of your companies switched gears during the pandemic on what you make. We did the same thing. We had calls from just next door, Mass General called up, a top-to-top discussion as soon as the pandemic really became serious in March of 2020. What can you do for us? You're a manufacturer here just down the road. I'm sure you can do something for us. We said, what are the top few things on your list? They said, we need face masks. If you can make us general face masks, that would be great. We're really short. If you can make something like an N95 or get close, that's even better. And so we put a team together, just 5 people, on a weekend, which was 2 days after the US basically went into lockdown. We spent a weekend and generated, based on our manufacturing capabilities and the materials that we had locally available, a face mask. And we began producing by that following Friday. There were a lot of parking lot, park kind of meetings that took place to hand off prototypes. We had Harvard, MIT involved, just everybody jumped in, virtual as well as these kind of oddball in-person meetings. And so we put together this face mask, and we made about 1 million of those over the following 3 months. This was an Instagram post that we put out there, not to toot our horn, but just to say, hey, we're not making shoes now, we're making masks. And it actually was the biggest, most popular post in the company's history. We had about 7 billion impressions and over 1 million likes, because it was just doing the right thing at the time. So a pretty cool experience, I think, for the company. Inspirational, no question about it, because everybody's locked down at home, but here we have a small team that not only developed, but is out there producing these face masks for the local needs. It also really, I think, developed a muscle in a stronger way, where we recognized we can do things faster. And so we've latched on to this specific example, and we expanded that through what we call 60-day pods, or agile ways of working. And as we worked our way through the pandemic, it really helped us become much more effective, much faster at things that needed to happen. So we have 4 pillars, and we're really focused on investing in these 4 areas. And I'll just walk through these very quickly. Our brand ambassadors. We used to be a company that was known as endorsed by no one. We wanted to make sure our product sold itself. We recognized over the years that if we were able to get out there and latch on to very specific athletes and influencers that aligned with our values, that was a good way to invest our marketing dollars. And so folks like Coco or UI, and there's a whole handful of others, Kawhi Leonard, etc. Super great ambassadors of our brand. And the way it used to work was, we'd have somebody like Steve Jobs. Again, he wasn't an ambassador of ours, but he loved our shoes, whether that was the 990s or 991s or 992s. He was always wearing New Balance, and so that kind of helped the momentum. But now we have influencers like Jack Harlow. Was anybody, I was just curious, just by a show of hands, Jack Harlow fans? Recognize the name, just a couple? Yeah. So if I were to ask the same number of folks that are younger than 25, it would be like 90% of the audience that would raise their hands. Actually, you'll see him a week from this Saturday on Saturday Night Live. He's going to host and be the musical guest. So he's a rapper, very popular. He's one of our ambassadors now. And again, really brings in the younger generation and keeps our customer pipeline pretty healthy. Actually, can we just back up 1 second? I'll just give a little intro on this. So I'm going to share a video that you might just find interesting. It's from our new manufacturing plant in Methuen. So we just opened up an 80,000 square foot, state-of-the-art, as of today, state-of-the-art manufacturing plant that makes 990 shoes. We'll make close to 1 million pair a year there. So a really important addition to our Made in USA capacity. And I just thought I'd show this. It's only a minute or 2 long, but you might just see the different steps that it takes to make a pair of shoes Seems like it should be easy, but it's fairly complicated. And we're constantly trying to work through Lean and Six Sigma steps to reduce variation and eliminate waste. And so it's just an ongoing, that's one of the parts of the recipe for us. It's how do we continue to find those opportunities to reduce the amount of minutes, manual minutes that it takes to make a pair of shoes, but retain the quality and the craftsmanship that everybody loves. So if we can just play this one, that would be great. So that's how we make a pair of shoes here in the U.S. right now. And we have a variety of models. The models are in like really high demand, and we continue to build capacity. We have we'll double capacity over the next 5 years here in the U.S., and we're really excited about that. I'll talk about in a second how we're approaching that from a robotics and automation standpoint, which is one of the most important elements as we grow the business. So just real quickly on system technology, the company right now, we're transforming the entire system technology from the ERP core, which is we're going with Microsoft D365 as a core, for supply chain planning, which is demand planning, supply planning, and inventory management. We're implementing O9 solutions. So those two combined will really change the way we do business. We're working off of 25-year-old systems that are not very effective. We've actually kind of manhandled it for the past few years in the roller coaster of the pandemic of shut down, start up, go faster, slow down, all those different variations. And so we're looking forward to having a digital twin that we can do what-if scenarios with, especially in that supply chain planning suite. So we're really excited about that. We're also taking out our current 2 PLM systems and buying one and implementing one PLM system that'll cover both apparel and footwear. That'll be game-changing. For innovation then, on the upper picture here, you can see what is our new sports research lab that's within our new track facility right down the road, about 5 miles, just next to the headquarters building. That gives us the capability to do climate chamber testing, force plates in the floor for all the different sports, dual track treadmills that are just world class. So we have over $20 million invested in that sports research lab where we can bring in our elite athletes and run them through a whole gambit of tests, improve the product right on the spot, and then help them become better. It also helps drive overall product development. The bottom picture there, robotics, obviously important. I think this entire audience here is dialed into robotics and their importance for the future of manufacturing, especially in the U.S. And so let me just show you this picture. Here's the new track building. Again, right across from the headquarters. Within that facility is that new sports research lab, which is really state-of-the-art. We continue to push the envelope on running, and so we've done really well within the Olympics, especially based on a lot of the technology that we've developed in the sports research lab, which was located in Lawrence. Just a couple of weeks ago, Emily Sisson, you may have heard, she broke the marathon record in Chicago. She's one of the New Balance brand athletes, and we continue to drive through carbon fiber plates and very specific foams, fine-tuning just to take fractions of a second off of the runs for some of these elite athletes. So really cool product innovation, which we're proud of. We're not a copycat brand. We like to lead with new products. And then for the robotics effort, we're really focused on speed and agility. So right now we're focused on roll-to-roll sublimation, automated conveyance, and then as products are coming in from our supply base, how do we inspect those in a more automated, more thorough way, so when it gets to the shop floor, it flows smoothly. And then last but not least, the DC networks and the made manufacturing. So significant investment in our DC network. We just opened up a new warehouse in Nashville. So within the US, we continue to expand. And within that warehouse, very much automated. So limited headcount, only where it matters, a lot of automation and mechanics. And then, as I mentioned, we'll double the size of our US manufacturing over the next 5 years. So just few things to mention briefly. Local supply base is super important to us. We're constantly seeking new suppliers of materials. And so even outside of the footwear industry, we're incubating on a regular basis new engineered textiles, for example, that may have been used for bulletproof vests for the military. How do we convert that over into US footwear? Strategic planning and advanced analytics, we found tremendous value in adding these together. So I have one leader that reports to me. She has both responsibilities. So really charting the course with me on what the strategy is going forward, tied in with advanced analytics and predictive analytics, is really a powerful solution for us. And then new ways of working, clearly incubating within high schools and vocational schools of all sorts, a workforce that's capable of helping us grow in all these areas, whether that's Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. So I'll leave you with a few additional thoughts. Caring is super important to us. That's one of the most fundamental elements as we look at robotics, taking out safety issues, injuries, reducing that, making sure everybody goes home in the same shape as they came to work is really important. As we show that to our employee base, they're more excited to come to work because they're not going to get injured. So that caring and compassion, number one. Envisioning what the future looks like. So not just next year, but 5 years and 10 years from now. Making sure that we're super clear about that. Inspiring based on all that work that we just talked about. What does that vision look like? How do we share that vision and inspire people? Because they want to be inspired. When they get up in the morning, they don't want to just go to a job that they don't really see what they're contributing. So inspiring the workforce. And then obviously executing flawlessly. I think those four things, if I were to summarize what let's call it our recipe for success is, those four are super important to us. So that's New Balance. Hopefully a little bit of insight. Again, tight time frame to share an awful lot, but again, I think these forums are good to connect people together, and reach out to me directly if you want to have any additional conversation, whether that's learning more about what we're doing, or if you have ideas on how we can get better. Totally open to that too. So thanks so much, everybody.
What an amazing story. I really love the concept about how they pivoted from making shoes to making masks in such a small time. We heard it from Pfizer yesterday and New Balance today. When you get to difficult times, how innovative we can be as an organizations. So our next speaker comes from a technology company that's probably implemented in majority of the manufacturers here. So I'm really excited to invite Mike Lackey, who is the Global VP of Solutions Management for SAP, to the stage. He and his team are automating and helping clients automate end-to-end manufacturing and supply chain. He has unique insights and has worked with clients all around the world on how to use automation to transform your business. And he's going to talk about the concept of digital manufacturing and his insights on digital engineering as well. Please join me in welcoming Mike Lackey from SAP. Thanks, Mike.
Got it. Well, my timing was a little bit off. I didn't get my music introduction. I asked them to play some ZZ Top or, so it didn't work out. My job is to work with you guys and understand where your business is going and how we at SAP can use technology to solve business problems. Because technology for the sake of technology is not a win for anyone. But solving business problems, I think at the end of the day, is why we're here in this room. I get asked a lot, says, Mike, how do you predict or how do you feed your direction to your product? I said, it was simple. We listen to you guys. And second of all, we listen to LNS. I mean, I just can't tell you how far, Matt, I've known you for a long time, and these guys, Tom and everyone, I meet with them regularly, and we listen to them. So get your feedback to these guys, and you're going to get it to me twice, okay? So, one thing I want to talk about, what I loved about the video here with New Balance, that wasn't manufacturing. That's artistry. And when you look at what we do in manufacturing and supply chain, we make things, we're artists. We're not just making products. We're bringing things to life. We're changing the way someone runs, how I love the care piece of it. So, as I travel, I hear smart manufacturing, factory of the future, digital manufacturing, live manufacturing, intelligent manufacturing. Every one of you has an initiative going on about this digital transformation, this industrial transformation. And you cannot do this without the supply chain. And you have to, in that supply chain, manufacturing is a big part of it. We have to look at change the way we plan, the way we deliver, and the way we manufacture. When we came out of the pandemic, the first thing we did was I tried to understand, what's my demand going to look like in the future? Where's it going to come from? Before the pandemic, 70% of my business was commercial. I was packaging food in 50-pound bags. And then all of a sudden, in this disruption, 60% of my business became consumer. I had to package in 12 to 16 versus 50-pound bags. Like, how did I change my processes? How do we make that transition not in 2 years, but in a few months? I think that's the challenge. The big key here is to really understand what your business problem is all about. If we can understand your business problem, or you understand your business problem, we can solve it. Now, I traveled a lot, especially over in Asia, and I spent a lot of time in China before the pandemic. And what I would hear is, I want Industry 4.0. Great. What are you trying to solve? I want Industry 4.0. If I say Industry 4.0, government gives me money. Okay. But then there was one, my last trip over before the pandemic. China International Marine Containers. And I asked them, I said, what is your business problem? They said, it's simple. We get an order for 2,000 containers. We used to have like a month lead time. Now it's down to less than 10 days. We can't make 2,000. We can make 1,500. So we make 1,500. They change the contract. They go 20 kilometers down the street and give 500 to my biggest competitor. I want my 2,000. I want to take 500 away from my competitor. That is understanding your business. That's a challenge we can solve. And when you have that business knowledge, you really can drive what's needed, applying technology and applying resources to solve those problems. Look, I used to think it was about capacity. It's no longer. It's about agility. How quickly can you respond to a spike? When, for New Balance, when someone wears those shoes and you say, wow, that's a star, or Steve Jobs, you see a spike. How quickly can you respond to that? If you get a spike for 10,000, you may not can make 10,000 because that demand signal doesn't last forever. 24, 48 times, 72 hours maybe, a week, and then it goes away. But if you can produce on that demand for 10,000, 3,000, you just add it to the bottom line. So it's about agility, and we have to start thinking like that. Not about the capacity of my plant. How well can I respond? How well can that supply chain, which, by the way, before the pandemic was single-threaded. We changed 20 years of a single linear supply chain and had to do it in 20 months to become more global, to get closer to the customer. And that's a big part of it. No longer can your plants maintain one product per production line. Biggest challenge I talk about today is how can I change my plants that I can run any product on any production line? How do I have to have standardization in my processes. How do we make that change? And that's a big part of what we're seeing. We still have to be efficient. Your lot sizes are getting smaller. Your batches are getting smaller. You may not be down to a lot size of 1, but they're getting smaller. 3 years ago, Hunter Douglas, who makes window blinds, I think of window coverings. I didn't think much about it or sitting there. He got up at Sapphire in front of 2,000 people and told the story of how in 8 months they went from 50,000 make the stock to deliver to Lowe's and Home Depot to 40,000 make to order. He goes, Mike, change was inevitable. He goes, we had to change our business. It wasn't about remaining profitable. It was about staying in business. They had to take 14 plants and make all those plants standard processes and be able to move production based on those needs. They had to change their process. That's what this digital transformation is about. As your business evolves, how do you change with it? How do you stay relevant? Change is inevitable. I used to say change is inevitable. Disruptions are inevitable. We live in a world of disruptions. How quickly can we change and respond to that? That's the big part of what this conference is all about and what I keep hearing. I love what Jeff and Blake said the first day. And we're going to build upon that. You're going to hear just repetitiveness of what we're hearing. The good thing is there's technology. There's technology that can help. Machine learning, I've heard a lot about that. Artificial intelligence. I'm a big proponent of 3D printing, additive manufacturing. We had to talk about that at breakfast this morning. I believe that's going to change supply chains forever as that technology grows and grows. We talk about cloud computing or big data. We've been doing big data manufacturing for 40 years. There's a thing called a historian. We're now the cool kids. Finance and everybody wants to take big data and analyze it. We've been there, done it. Come talk to manufacturing. We'll tell you how to get value out of that. So I love what we're doing in that area. So there's technologies that can help us solve these problems. And I think that's really what at SAP, what we're trying to do is understand where you're going so that we can map with you, go that journey with you, and deliver the technology. Everybody know this guy? Well, he was in your plant the last week. He walked out after 40 years and all the knowledge went with him. I hear it over and over again. I cannot find workers. I cannot retain workers. You guys, believe me, we have the same problem in development from a software company that you're having in manufacturing. The best example, I was up in Greenville, South Carolina. I was walking to a plant, and on the door was a sign that says, sign the paperwork, start immediately. And I asked him, I said, are you telling me if I sign, I'd put you on the packing line right now? He said, we're that desperate. And I go, wow, Greenville, South Carolina, really? Okay, I get that. So there's a lot out there that's happening here in this area of the worker. Now, what's it going to take to solve it? I think there's 3 things that have to happen, and I have this conversation a lot. First of all, the government has to get better involved. Local states have to make it more attractive for manufacturing to come. Because these kids today do not want to work in an environment that is not considered cool or innovative. Okay, number 1, we have to make manufacturing relevant in the U.S. again. Number 2, the universities have to really look at their curriculum and start saying, what happened to the vocational schools? I put a daughter through college. I know what I paid, okay? She didn't want to go in state, so believe me, I know what I pay. A lot of kids don't want to have that debt, but they'll come in the factory if they know there's a future. And the third thing, your software or your technology providers, we have to do a better job of making our solutions more innovative. The generation wants to work in their smart devices. They don't want to work in the gray screen, the blue screen, the green screens that we used to have. They want to be innovative. They want technology to be in their daily lives at work. So you have to put pressure on us to change the way we're doing. That's why I love what we're doing in the cloud, because I got a blank canvas. And I get to use technologies that says I can make that innovative for the worker of the future. There's a few states that are doing a great job. The new Silicon Valley, or the Silicon Valley, is going to be Ohio. That state gets it. I love what they're doing. They're attracting talent and opening up in manufacturing. But we all three have to work together to change this. And I believe we're making strides, but we've got to get over that. We've got to make it a jump step here. We have to make a leap, not just baby steps. So I have a lot of conversations with municipalities and universities about how we can change to create that worker of the future. If not, we're going to have a great shortage. We talk about innovation, cobots, robots, AGVs. Well, because we can't find workers, it's accelerating that industrial automation that we're seeing here. So, we got to retain that knowledge this person has. We talked about vibration. We talked about sound. I've been on many plant tours, and they says, Mike, I got to take you back. That machine's about to go down. I go, how can you tell with all the noise in this plant? This person knows. The next generation does not want to have that. They want it on their device to tell them, we need to go fix that machine. So that's a big thing of what we're seeing, and I think you do have to modernize, or you may not be around. And that's what's driving. Sustainability. Yes, there's a social responsibility, but in manufacturing, sustainability equals profitability. We are where it comes to provision here, okay? If I have to produce 1,020 units to get 1,000 out the door, that means I had to order 10 extra units. That means that was my suppliers had to produce 10 more. That means I had to put 10 more on a ship, 10 more in a plane, 10 more in a truck, and that carbon footprint or the emissions just keep going up. So when we reduce weight, and waste, and we improve our first pass yields, we have an impact. I was down in Mexico, and I think we have to really understand what is sustainability. And I was working with a customer. They brought me down because they had a capacity issue. They couldn't meet demand. And I walked in, and they're making aluminum parts for the automotive industry. And they said, we're the most sustainable company in Mexico because we can recycle 40% of that aluminum. I said, great. You didn't bring me down here for that. You brought me down. You got a capacity issue. So we're walking. And, the melting aluminum, goes into the press, and it comes really fast and hot, and part comes out. All of a sudden, a trolley comes by with about 5 wagons behind it, full of parts. I go, what's that? Oh, don't worry about that scrap. We can reuse it. I said, okay. You told me you had a capacity problem. There's your capacity problem. But you ignored it because from a sustainability, you could reuse it. It wasn't being scrapped. It wouldn't be written off. It was being remelted. But we have to really balance what that sustainability is and that profitability piece of it. So yes, there is a social responsibility. Every plant manager I talk with today has to report their carbon footprint. It used to be once a year for the annual report. Then it became the quarterly report. Today it's every week, every day they are monitoring that. So that's a big part. How we manage energy in manufacturing is our impact on the sustainability. That's a big part. What is our end goal? You got to be able to build any part, anytime, at any plant. Disruptions are going to happen. And one thing we learned is business doesn't stop. You still have pressure to deliver, and you still have pressure to that bottom line. You have stockholders that are, hey, I get it. There was a disruption. Now, I used to believe, I used to have like my top 5 disruptions. Now I just wake up and go through my feeds, and there's another one today. Ship stuck in the Suez Canal. And here in North America, when that bridge between Tennessee and Ohio got compromised, and then within 3 hours, there was something like 6,000 barges with food spoiling or spoilage behind it because they couldn't get down the mighty Mississippi. Disruption. I was talking with one of the customers, building a new plant, a greenfield plant. I said, how's that going? He goes, we're about 9 months behind. I said, really? Amazon cornered the market. They announced they were going to build 50 new warehouses. They cornered the market on sprinkler systems for fire prevention. They said, we couldn't get it, so we can't finish the build because we have to put that in first before we can go. Now, the good news is Amazon backed off to 35, and some became available, and now they're back on track. But I would have never thought that Amazon was a distraction, or disruption to the supply chain. They couldn't get their new factory done, therefore they couldn't meet their customers' needs. It's happening every day, and how we respond and how we manage disruptions is what this industrial transformation is all about. So I really believe we bring intelligence here, and we start thinking about agility. We start thinking about, can I manufacture those smaller batches and smaller lots at the same cost, same quality, or even reduce cost, improve quality that we were doing mass production. That is what's going to change, and that's what's really going to drive. It's not just about data. When I talk about any product, any place, any time, standardization of your plans. What you guys are asking me is I need 5 years of innovation in the next 2 years. I can not only roll out solutions to my plants 2 a year, 3 a year. I need 5 a quarter. I need 10 a quarter. I need to be doing 20 plants a year. And within 2 to 3 years, I need all my 40 plants tied together. One global entity delivering your customers' demand. That's at the heart here. And it's not just about collecting data. We have enough data. I think a study of 70% of data goes unused in manufacturing. It's about collecting the right data and knowing the impact on your business. Let's get into it. Jaguar Land Rover, new plant in the UK. If you have a Jaguar Land Rover, if you're driving one of their SUVs, that plant produces 4-cylinder diesel petrol, V6 diesel petrol, V8 diesel petrol on one single production line. No two engines are the same. They're even tuned by the market they're going in. They wanted a 45-second takt time. That takt time is now down to like 33 seconds. An engine rolls off that plant. Not only in that process do we collect data, we analyze it, and we tell that equipment to go or no go in 150 milliseconds. That's the speed at which we have to think of manufacturing. How quickly can we make that decision? That's what machine learning is bringing to the table for us. And that's why I like the technology that's coming together from a lot of different partners that's going to drive change for you. So at the end of the day, I'm just going to leave you with 3 things. What makes the supply chain resilient? And again, you cannot talk about planning, you can't talk about logistics without talking about manufacturing. Capturing the customer's requirement, knowing where your demand signal is, and getting that into production as soon as possible. If I can correct the right, taking in externals, weather, social political status. I grew up on the shop floor, and we thought we were pretty invincible. We had a plant down in Arecibo, Puerto Rico, and Charleston, South Carolina. Hugo came down, took out the plant. That was a hurricane. Took out the plant in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. Came right up the coast and took the one out in Charleston. We were down for 6 months when I was in production. Made a mistake. But now calculating that ahead of time and knowing how to reduce risk, I think is at the heart of what we're talking about here at this event. First of all, your supply chain has to be connected. Okay? When something rolls off the production line, I want that truck at the dock. I don't want it sitting in inventory. I don't want a finished goods inventory. I want it out into the customer, because the sooner I get it to the customer, as soon as I can invoice, I can collect. The C-suite is happy. So you got to connect every process. It's not only collecting data, but it's tying business context to that data to know the impact on your business. That's how you drive change. I have 2,000 units that are in WIP. What does that cost? What is that carrying cost? Okay, how quickly can I reduce that? Those are the type decisions we have to make. Second of all, contextualize every decision. Bring the business, keep the customer at your focus, and bring that business context and the right data. We do a great job of getting the right people in a room to make a decision. We do a poor job of getting the right data in that room to make a decision. So it's not about collecting more data, it's about collecting the right data and knowing the impact on your business. And the last thing I'll leave you with, collaborate with your ecosystem. Everybody's talking about networks. Networks tying new suppliers, new logistics providers together so that you can find and be more efficient is a big key to what this is about. And solution providers. Our friend Siemens, I had Siemens this morning. Siemens and SAP together. If those are 2 your solutions, demand what you want from us. So it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, it takes a village to change the transformation in the supply chain. And I think that's what we're here, and that's what we're going to deliver. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Our final keynote comes from LNS Research. Tom Comstock, principal analyst here at LNS Research. He's going to talk, he has traveled all around the world to drive change by integrating digital and technologies within their environment. He's going to talk about how do you drive momentum and accelerate your industrial transformation. Please welcome Tom Comstock. Thanks, Tom.
So before I go into my presentation, I have to say Mike is dead wrong about one thing. I think we proved in the vote earlier in the morning that we are not the cool kids, or at least we're not the cool kids yet. So my presentation today is about pivot to value, and there's been a lot of discussion about the chasm and this vision to value message. What's I think been missed in that is the pivot that's required. So that's really what I want to focus in on. If you've been in two of my sessions yesterday, I apologize. I'm showing the exact same slide. I do it in virtually every presentation because I think it is the most important data LNS has found. And that is all the hard work you guys are doing is paying off for some companies that are able to successfully execute industrial transformation. Well, we have all the data about how it can help as you go up the maturity curve, as you go through the stages of transformation. You can improve your manufacturing metrics. You can improve OEE, on time in full, et cetera. But Mike Carroll challenged us a couple of years ago to say, and challenged everybody in this room, is that's all good, but did you make a financial impact on your organization? Did you improve cost of goods sales? Did you improve your operating margins? Did you increase revenues? And the answer is, when you look at the data, the leaders, including many of you in this company, in this room, and on this virtual webcast, are actually making a financial improvement on the company. So we asked three questions, cost of goods sold, operating margins, and revenues. And we got a bell-shaped curve like the one on the left, which shows that leaders are getting substantially more and bigger benefit over on the right-hand side. And that's all summarized in the chart kind of in green at the bottom. And when I say transformation leaders are 57% more likely to have reduced cost of goods sold by 10%, that's a huge number. And it's also being recognized very widely, which is what the text is reflecting. 80 to 85% of leaders are able to get at least a 3% reduction in cost of goods sold, or could increase their revenue by at least 3%. They were able to improve their operating margins. So the good news is all the hard work you're doing can have a dramatic impact on your organization over time. The bad news is 75% of companies have not realized any value. Zip, zero, nada. And some of that's where they are. They're starting off. They're in the beginning stages. So, any business value is, down the road. But what we have found is there is a fundamental barrier to success. And that's called the transformation chasm. And there was some discussion in the panel discussion at the end yesterday. But what is unique about the chasm, and Jeffrey Moore saw it in selling to you, what he said is that a new technology that starts out, something like artificial intelligence, sells to people that care about technology first and are willing to take big risks because they're trying to do big things. I call that group the lunatic fringe because they're really doing things that there is no proof will have value to their corporation. And then over time, there's some evidence that this is successful, and it starts being sold to the early majority. And those companies care about completely different things. They want a whole product. They want a reference. In manufacturing, they want a reference in their vertical, in their geography. Heard that a few times from all of you from Minneapolis, how you want to know, was this successful in Minneapolis? And that really said that what Jeffrey Moore said is you need to change the way you're doing your sales and marketing because talking about technology is not the issue anymore. The issue is you need to talk about references. You need to pivot in the way you sell. And what we realized as we looked at transformation, in fact, you have to pivot in your transformation journey. What works for you at the beginning, in fact, hinders your success as you go forward. And so when we were thinking about this, we sort of said, okay, can't you just start with all the best practices? We've now identified 7 best practices with 3 dimensions each across people, technology, and process. So why not start there? And the answer is you could. Some companies can, but the vast, vast majority can't. So why not? And so what we really saw is that you have to, on the vision focus side, the first 3 stages of maturity, you have to prove yourself. It's not unreasonable that the CEO of most of your corporations is not going to give you a blank check and say, come back 5 years from now and show me what you've done. It's one of the interesting things, the commonality between the vendors and manufacturers now, that no one wants to talk about a 3 or 5 year big bang project. Those days are gone. So what you really have is to start, you've got to dip your toe in the water. Technology experimentation is a perfectly valid thing to do. And you're probably going to be mostly a corporate initiative and a few select plants. Usually those are your lighthouse plants, and you have to prove yourself right, so you got to get big wins. The real problem is, that's all good, but eventually you've got to be all in. Eventually, you've got to engage the whole organization and focus on your whole manufacturing network. Eventually, you got to target the big problems and the hard problems. So a lot of you out there and a lot of customers we talk to say, I want to achieve transformation, and let's just put a number on it, a 10% achievement, but I want to do it 1% at a time. Now, one that confuses transformation immediately with continuous improvement, but it also doesn't work forever. It works to get the program going. But eventually, you've got to pivot. And we keep talking about this as one of the big technical barriers, the data infrastructure. Somewhere along the line, you got to worry about your data infrastructure. We all know all these fancy phrases about data being the core of transformation, whether it's data is the new oil, data is the new blockchain, data is the blah, blah, blah. The problem is plumbing, and that's what we're talking about here. Infrastructure, what we're talking about here, has no direct return. You are literally going to have to, at some point, ask your management to pay for something that has no direct return. The return comes from the insights you get. And in fact, the return doesn't even come from the insights. It comes from the actions you take based on that. Jeff from Southwire was in our session yesterday, and he said, we came up with this great data, and what we realized is nobody was even using it. Had to get the CEO to have a metric to show how much they were using the data to actually make the impact he needed to. So we have all sorts of writings about analytics and data and industrial hubs. The answer is, this doesn't pay off. So if your CEO is asking you what everybody else is asking in a program of make sure you get an ROI, one of the most important things isn't going to get done. You got to find a way to get around to it. We've even seen it in our analysis of your ROI payback strategy. When, even before I got here, Matt looked at IIoT programs, and they all started with a goal of the far right. I'm going to change the way we do business. I'm going to change the way we do it. I'm going to go to some servitization model. I'm going to totally radically change my business. And everybody failed. It was a disaster. And what we're recommending now is start. Where do you get the early benefits? You get it starting at the department. You get it where you have more control. You get it where focusing on, again, the quick wins and the low-hanging fruit. And that's really good, but at some point, you got to pivot. At some point, you got to look at the enterprise and working across processes and across silos at some point. Another one that we talked about in a couple of sessions yesterday is culture. We have significant evidence that eventually you got to take on culture. You got to build transformation into your processes. It's got to become part of the way you do business. But I wouldn't recommend you starting with culture. One, culture is really hard to change. And two, most companies wouldn't know how to change the culture, what that culture should change to as they're starting transformation. So it makes no sense to adopt the program to culture best practice of a transformation leader as you're starting. It's too much effort to get the process going, to get momentum. But eventually, you need to change and do it. And it also is about technology experimentation. So a lot of the vendors in the room here hate the fact that a lot of you are looking at a lot of technology. And in the early stages of transformation, that is absolutely valid. We hear from Amazon and other companies that are delivering artificial intelligence that most of the time when they first engage with companies, they don't know why they want artificial intelligence. Somebody told them to go look at it, they're looking at it, and they don't know what business problem they could solve. And that's not a bad thing. You gotta kind of get to look at the technology and figure it out. And so what we see is leaders are looking at 5 different kinds of technologies versus 2 versus followers. That's a best practice early, to look at all of this technology. Somewhere along the line, though, you got to put on your bets on what it works and what makes sense in your organization. And budget. So we asked 4 years ago, what's the budget for transformation? And our conclusion is everybody's underfunding transformation, right? Because if we say something like 20% of our survey base is companies with $5 billion or more in revenue, yet most of them are only looking at $100 million kinds of investments in transformation, you're not going to buy a lot of cobots with that. You're not going to buy a lot of vision systems and software systems, et cetera. What you're going to be able to do is get some pilots going. But so what? At some point, you've got to ask for more money. But most organizations want you to have proved your value. So what we like to say in the early stages, it is right to go after the quick wins. It is right to go after the low-hanging fruit. And you need to earn the right to ask for the money to do that data infrastructure. Now, some companies, you don't always have to do this. We know at least one big life sciences company that says they got right up front the time and space to do some of that experimentation and to invest in that infrastructure right up front. But most companies aren't going to let you do it, so you need to earn it, you need to go forward. And that's why we say there's a pivot. And pivots are really hard. What do we mean by this? There are some things that, as you build a capability, it's foundational, you don't have to change. And there's some things that are just going to improve incremental. What we're saying is when you've got your program going and you're getting successful, that's when you need to change. And change when things are working is really hard. And this is, in fact, I think the single biggest challenge to getting to the returns we talked about at the very beginning. So one, I'm going to look at the people, process, and technology, one slide each. So first and foremost, I'm sure you've heard from us, Matt's whole thing of the power of pronouns. It's pronouns, right? Preposition. See, I don't ever get it right. You shouldn't be doing industrial transformation to or for manufacturing. You should be doing it with. Great, we all know that. But at some point, you need to start moving towards institutionalizing transformation into your corporate culture. And when we look at the statistics, and we had this coming out of both of my sessions, you at some point start to need to put it into performance appraisals. One of the questions we asked, how many plant managers have somewhere on their performance appraisal an MBO tied to transformation? And the answer is less than 10%. And yet this is a big corporate initiative and there's no personnel connections. Well, that makes sense in the early stages, but at some point, leaders are putting it into their personnel programs, probably why they're twice as likely to have HR on the program team. Another thing we've noticed is that IT and OT, everybody thinks about that as a technology convergence, but it's also an organizational convergence. Leaders are only 3 times more likely to be linking IT and OT and maybe making it a single organization. And even if you don't go that far, cross-training, program, career track, job sharing, those kinds of activities are what leaders are doing to help build and converge these organizations. And then one that I think a lot of people encounter issues at the beginning and need to solve over time, but again, you don't focus on culture as you're trying to prove that this can work, is around continuous improvement. You've got that lean team or that Six Sigma team, that world-class manufacturing team and process. You've just spent 10 years getting it embedded and working across your manufacturing plants. And along comes this new corporate initiative called digital transformation, and a bunch of data scientists who have never been in the plant, and they're all gonna go fix manufacturing. And most of those continuous improvement teams don't understand why these people are showing up. They don't have a lot of team for them. But what we're seeing is significant evidence that in the mature stages of transformation, that in fact these are being merged. That these teams are being brought together because they're both about improvement. And if you're going to get to the point where you embed transformation in your business, well, it makes sense to embed it in your continuous improvement teams in the plants over time. Just as true, there's process pivots you need to make as well. So I think virtually every company that I've talked to over the last 24 hours has said, we're starting by rolling out to our lighthouse plants. They may or may not use the exact word lighthouse. World Economic Forum tells you to do this. McKinsey tells you to do this. Go to your lighthouse plants. What are those plants? Your very best. And it's good to go prove out that technology experimentation. So you're taking your best plants and making them even better. The pivots required is to say, I can't keep trying to pursue the diminishing returns of my best plants. I got to think about my whole manufacturing network. I got to think about the rest of the fleet. I've got to go to a different business model, and therefore we advocate the virtual center of excellence. And Matt and I have both written blog posts. If you want to see more there, great. Yesterday in the Life Sciences Roundtable, we had a whole discussion about Agile and whether you could do Agile processes in manufacturing in a highly regulated environment. But there was a premise that we all accepted, which is the waterfall method of traditional IT rollouts are over. We've got to go to some form of Agile. As a software person, I will tell you nobody can go to Agile exactly as is. You need to make modifications that make sense in your world. But you also then need to reconcile it with continuous improvement. As I like to say, I don't know many plant managers that want to install a minimally viable product in their plant. And yet that is standard vocabulary of Agile. Some words I'd get rid of as I kind of merged it into my system. So Pfizer yesterday talked about they're using scaled Agile, I can't say that fast, as kind of this blended form. What we really see is companies are going to have to figure this out. It's going to have to become part of how they do business. And it isn't Agile as in the book. It isn't continuous improvement in the book. Some merged fork system. And you got to pivot away from quick wins. You're going to hit diminishing returns pretty quickly. At some point, you're going to have to focus on that, some of the bigger problems. And when we ask the questions about are leaders more likely to be focusing in on bigger problems or only quick wins, we see that the leaders are much less likely to be focused on low-hanging fruit and those kinds of things. Just as true in technology. Should have probably figured out I was going to talk about technology somewhere in here. One of the biggest pivots is pivoting away from technology to solutions. So a really interesting fact about leaders versus followers. Leaders are twice as likely to say their OT is good and widely rolled out. And yet they're twice as likely to say we're re-architecting it. Why? Because when you get past the technology experimentation phase, what is artificial intelligence? Can it apply? What is these advanced industrial analytics? You eventually get down to, how do I fix somebody's production? How do I improve quality? And what are the solutions to do that? And one of the things we also see is that leaders are 3 times more likely to figure out their operational architecture. What's operational architecture? I hope most of you know it, because if you've been working with L&S, you've probably been hearing us beat this drum for a long time. It's your enterprise architecture that figures out how OT, IT, and new transformative digital technologies are going to play together. It's your roadmap. It's your 2B vision. It's your vision story of where you're going to go. And fundamentally, you have to invest in data infrastructure. Leaders are 83% more likely to invest in the infrastructure even when they know there is no ROI. That's the big hurdle, the big technical nut that's required as part of the pivot. You gotta focus on that. Last night at dinner, I was saying we often encourage early stage companies to think about a 2-track. Yes, you gotta have your wins, you gotta demonstrate success, but any investment, any leaning in early to this pivot that you can do around data infrastructure can really help your program go fast over time. And if you pivot, and that's the key thing, if you pivot, you can get these sustainable, high-value returns that I started with. So again, it's not easy. Transformation, by definition, is hard. And one of the hardest things is I've got my program going. It's actually starting to prove value. It's doing some good things. It's time to change. Not usually when people want to change. So we've now got 14, and I'm not asking you to try and read this slide. I understand it's an eye chart. But it is 14 different dimensions of the pivot across people, process, and technology. So this is not a trivial thing. This is the single most important thing you need to do to get to sustainable and measurable financial improvement for your transformation initiative. So with that, I'll just wrap up by saying it is paying off for the select few, including some of the companies in this room. Leadership requires you to pivot mid-flight. As you finally got your program going, you've got to change the way you're doing business, and you've got to change across people, process, and technology. Thank you very much.
Can we give everyone, all the keynote speakers, a big round of applause? This concludes our morning session. We're going to meet all together at 10 o'clock on 4th floor for the executive roundtables. Again, I think we had some problems with the survey yesterday. We fixed it. If you guys can take 30 seconds, give us some feedback on the content and the keynotes, really appreciate it. Once again, thank you everyone, and I hope you have the great rest of the day.
Please welcome co-founder and president of L&S.